From TheMossShow.com, this is Hilton Giesner with another awesome episode of The Moss Show. In this episode, we'll be finding out about the SharePoint Administration Toolkit, which came out recently in version 4. It's a free toolkit from the Microsoft SharePoint team to help troubleshoot and keep your farm running smoothly. The SharePoint conference is coming up next week already, so if you guys haven't booked and made your plans, it's probably too late. But for those of you who are going, I'm sure it's going to be a blast, and I'm looking forward to hearing about all the 2010 stuff that's going to be coming out there. So if anyone is there and they feel like sharing some info with the show, then you can send an email to feedback@themossshow.com, and if it's clean and wholesome feedback, then I'll read it out on the air as well. Back to this week's show. Our guests this episode are Dan Winter and Luca Bandinelli. Both Dan and Luca are program managers on the SharePoint Customer Advisory Team, also known as the CAT or CAT. So prior to joining the product group, Dan worked for 8 years in CSS, retiring as a senior escalation engineer. While in CSS, he worked on SharePoint and Exchange Server products. Luca worked for 8 years in MCS as a solution architect and as a SharePoint ranger. So let's hear what Dan and Luca have to say about the SharePoint Administration Toolkit.
So Luca and I are both program managers within the SharePoint group, and our specific responsibilities are to evaluate feedback from customers and interactions with customers to look not only to help them in the moment, but also to look more broadly down the road, look at our larger customer base, and determine if we have a need for some guidance, a need for some tools, maybe a need for changes within the product or changes within the next or later future versions of the product to help customers in those areas. So we focus in a broader fashion than maybe the traditional PM would, and specifically, I personally, Dan has the operational focus as a primary, and Luca works primarily with security and governance. Horizontally across all of the products, not just on WSS, not just on Moss, but we look across everything under the SharePoint umbrella. So looking at the admin toolkit, we both obviously have some very specific hooks into that, given that, and it is considered our tool output from a lot of these customer engagements that I referred to before.
So the admin toolkit is really a roll-up of some specific feedback that you've been receiving either from customers directly or from out in the field, from things like product support and things like that, of some of the pain points that they're having and some of the useful things that they've put together. Is that correct?
Yes, it really is. It's our team's really deeply committed to supporting folks using our products. We wanted to be clear that we are listening, and this is one of the mechanisms that we're able to provide answers in a shorter term. We've actually had the toolkit on a cycle. We're on our 4th version now, so we're releasing it multiple times within a year. It's part of our commitment to ensure that we get that better experience with the in-market product.
So this is the 4th version, as you mentioned, of the admin toolkit, and this one came out around about end of July, sort of early August, I think it was, somewhere around there, or late August at least. And this was the 2nd or 3rd one out this year already. So it sounds like you've got quite an aggressive release cycle to try and get new updates and new versions out quite frequently.
Yeah, that's right. Our first release was April 2008. We did another one in August 2008. Then this year, like you mentioned, we had 2, February 2009 and then August 2009. So, like you said, we're a bit more aggressive, certainly more aggressive than the actual product releases. But the point is that by doing that, we're able to get more feedback and act on more things than if we just did it once a year or once every 2 years.
And is the goal then to try and get a feel for how the functionality is being used and possibly even then to roll those kind of features into future versions?
That's exactly right. We, as we looked at 14 or SharePoint 2010, I should say, we specifically evaluated the things that we did produce out of band, as we call it, or in the toolkit, and looked to ensure that as much of that as we possibly could achieve is actually a part of the core product. So that definitely is a goal, is to take the feedback and integrate it back in.
So that gives us some good background on why you guys kind of put the SharePoint Admin Toolkit together, or the I think you guys call it the SPAT, the SPAT. I don't know if it's a common term in the US, but in Britain and here in South Africa, spat means to have a kind of an argument or a fight with somebody. So I'm not going to call it the spat going forward too much, if you guys don't mind.
I think we're moving away from calling it that as well.
Okay, great. But that gives us some good background. Do you want to maybe give us some idea of what the actual admin toolkit contains? You know, what are the bits? If you want to, we can go through some of the history, but I think certainly the most important thing is to understand what version 4 contains, what the full suite is, maybe what some of the changes are that have come, and just as a whole, for those who haven't used it at all, let's maybe discuss what the features are that it contains.
Sure. So at a high level, the features in version 4, I'll start there. The first big investment we made was to continue working on the SharePoint diagnostics tool. So we actually shipped the second version of the diagnostic tool with various updates and new features. And we can get into the detail of these in a moment. But the next thing we put a lot of work on is the permission reporting tool, which is meant to answer quite a few of the pieces of feedback we got around the permission space. We also added some STS ADM commands, the update quota operation to make it easier to manage quotas. We did document the unlock FGT report, which is actually a part of the permissions report piece, but that is an extension in STS ADM. And then the last thing we did in the version 4 was the security configuration wizard manifest files, so that you could utilize the security config wizard against SharePoint, against WSS and Moss. So that's our 4.0 release. More historically, the 3.0 release was actually, the February 2009 was completely about that first release of SharePoint Diagnostics tool. So that was the update of that release. And then the prior releases, we did some things like the profile replication engine you may be familiar with. We also did Batch Site Manager, the update alerts in the STS ADM tool. So there's some other tools that have historically been in the toolkit that have remained as well.
So just to clarify, things like the batch updater, although there hasn't been a lot of talk around it in version 4, I'm guessing because there hasn't been a lot of change around it, it's still included as part of the toolkit. So the toolkit hasn't been changing its focus, it's just been growing in terms of functionality per version. Yeah,
it has, and there have been little changes, like the batch site manager. When we designed the permission reporting tool, we decided to release it as a solution. So the batch site manager initially wasn't a solution. So part of the work in 4.0 was to move it into an actual WSP. So there is minor work that we may do here and there, and with every release, we do evaluate the feedback that we have gotten on the existing tools and do bug fixes and whatnot, but we don't necessarily make new feature investments unless the feedback warrants it, like it did with the SharePoint Diagnostics tool.
It's interesting also that although there are a suite of different kind of tools all aimed at administration, the tools themselves kind of just through the installation explore different aspects of SharePoint as well. So, as you mentioned, some of the tools take the form of STS ADM commands, some of them take the form of solution packages, WSPs that need to get installed, and some of them are, just pure Windows EXEs or command lines that are accessing the API. It's interesting to see the suite of use of the different versions and ways that you can extend and build on SharePoint. Shall we break into some of the specific functionality? Maybe let's talk about SP Diag, SharePoint Diagnostic Tool.
Sure, love to.
So Dan, I think that's your focus. Maybe give us a little bit of background around what it does.
Yeah, that's my baby. So the SharePoint Diagnostics tool, and like I mentioned, a lot of, if not all of these tools came from feedback working with customers and working with our field engineers, et cetera. The SharePoint Diagnostics tool was initially brought about because we recognized, specifically when diagnosing performance issues in SharePoint, that it was very difficult to ascertain where a specific problem was or what a problem was when you had performance issues. There's so many different angles that you could kind of look at a problem, and they all could possibly show issue, and it was really hard to kind of figure out where was the root cause of all of these, or am I just looking at a symptom of something else that happened wrong? So the SharePoint Diagnostics tool, in its inception, was meant to make that easier. And the point of it was not to take you all the way to the answer, but rather to help guide you to the place where you needed to dig in deeper. So, the investments we've made there are specifically to help gather information so that you have at your fingertips the things that you actually would need to look at in a consistent way. Also, in the 4.0 release, we did some work to check a few things for you that we think are common misconfiguration or problems that could lead to performance issues that we weren't 100% sure that everyone was really looking at these things, and we wanted to make sure there was good coverage of them. And then finally is to give you the tool set to be able to actually dig into the data in a meaningful way. The specific real big value add that the tool offers is that it takes all the data that's collected and it unifies it. So if I collect the ULS, the app, the IIS logs across an entire farm, I get a single unified view of all of this data coming together and can have it cross-joined with the perfmon data I may have collected as well from multiple machines all at one time. So I get a single conversation, which we found in dealing with performance issues, you really need to look at the whole farm, not just a single machine. So again, it was meant to address that concern, and from what we've seen, it has done a good job of that. But obviously, we're always willing to accept more feedback.
So just to clarify, because I think that's an important part of the feature set there, when you say it consolidates the views, it consolidates in two different ways. The one is it consolidates all the various types of log files. It consolidates the ULS logs, the perfmon stats, and the IIS logs, for example, all into one view with nice little clickable chart and graphing and all of that. But it also consolidates those across the servers in your farm. So, if you've got 5, 10, whatever, many front-end servers, it'll go ahead and collect the data from all of the front ends. But if it's for addressing performance, is there not a performance concern actually going ahead and gathering that data at the same time?
Right, correct. So in the 4.0 release of the Toolkit, the diagnostic tool provides a command line interface that you can use to gather the data. The tool itself does provide a few options to help you as the administrator decide what kind of impact it does have on your farm. So it reduces the number of things it might do at one time to make it have a minimal impact as it gathers or loads the data. But to further reduce that potential effect, the command line options allow you to, in a very streamlined, simple, one operation at a time kind of process, to gather the information in a way where you can then take it off the farm that's having the problem and analyze it in an offline mode. We made a number of investments in the offline mode capability in the version 2 of the tool, so that you could truly separate yourself from the farm and do the work.
Okay, Dan, so we've spoken at a pretty high level. Can we maybe talk through a specific scenario to understand, now I've got performance problems on my farm. How do I go about using the SP-Diag tool to analyze it? How do I get started looking at what could be wrong? And I think we can talk through the various tabs that the tool offers in terms of its UI, maybe that could help us understand how to use it.
Right, sure. So the first kind of use case I would envision would be, like you had mentioned before, maybe I'm having a performance issue on the farm. I really don't want to add to the performance issue, but I do want to get the data that I can look at. Say I know this performance issue happened yesterday. So here we are. Today's actually Tuesday. I have no idea when this will go live, but say the issue happened on a Monday. So I would install the Toolkit on my client machine, and I would go to the folder on disk, which is under the Program Files Microsoft, the SharePoint Admin Toolkit, and I'd go to the SharePoint Diagnostics folder, which is where SP-Diag lives. And I would actually copy that folder onto the server through just a network share. Once that folder is on the server, I would go to the server, and to be clear, when I say server, I mean any server that's joined to the farm. I could use, if the web front ends are the ones that are heavily impacted, I would most likely want to go to, say, my index server and run the tool there, so that I'm not compounding the effect on the worker process that the machine is starving from currently, etc. You want to be sensible about where you do this. If every single machine in the farm, or you have a single machine farm, if they're all affected, then you just have to make the choice. But try to look for the machine in the farm that is the least impacted by the problem, and copy the tool there. And then what I would do is I would open a command window, and I would run spdiag. You can run it with a question mark if you want a quick reference to go by, but I would run it with the mode snapshot, and I would gather the actual XML that basically contains all the information about my environment. Once that was done, I would go back and run it in the logs mode, so that I could specify a start date of maybe Sunday and an end date of maybe today, and gather all the data from every machine in the farm that crosses the time period where I've had this problem. So I want some, if possible, I want some data from before the problem happened, because then that way I can be sure to kind of see the things that happened when the problem started to occur. That's always better than just jumping into where the problem's happening right now, because you could find some errors that would indicate what actually caused whatever chain reaction or blocking factor to make the current situation occur. So that's ideal. It's not always possible, but in this case, I would target Sunday as my start, and then I could target Monday or Tuesday as my end, because either of those log sets would have the data for the problem. Once what that'll do is it'll go out to all the machines in the farm. It would gather all of the logs through admin shares. So I need to be sure that I'm an administrator and that I have box admin rights. I need to be a SharePoint farm admin, and essentially I need to have the same level of access that you would with STS-ADM, meaning that you would have access to SQL, right, in order to run the snapshot piece, because that's going to run some OM. So I need to make sure I have sufficient rights. If any of this is confusing, it's all covered in detail in TechNet for the reference of the toolkit. But once I gather all the data, I would then have a single folder that had a big folder structure in it with lots of files, and I would copy that back to my client machine. Once it's on my client machine, I would open the spdiag UI. The difference between the UI and the command line simply is when I don't pass parameters, I get the UI. When I pass parameters, I get the command line. So if I open spdiag again, but without passing parameters, I can then go to File, and I can import project, do the project import operation, specify the folder that I had copied from the production environment, give it a project name. I have some options there for some other options that I might want to set, but at that point I'm pretty much saying, okay, it'll pull all the data in from the folder that I'd copied, make the project, spin it up, and then I can start looking through that data. Given that this is a performance problem, I'm going to most likely first check the diagnostics tab just to see if there's any kind of problem that Microsoft has recommended I take a look at. If that checks out clean, or at least it meets with my expectations, I would go to the Trends tab, and I'd start going through the actual data, selecting on the filter that I want to perhaps start with the IS and the ULS traffic. Maybe I'd also want to include the application log as well, and start moving down through the time to see specifically where I might have errors. There's lots of different techniques that you might employ. It is always beneficial to have perfmon, because you can do the charting to make this a lot faster. But without that available, what you would want to probably start with is, after you've selected to have those logs report in, you would probably go to the custom reports and pick a custom report that makes the most sense, like maybe slowest pages. If I'm having a performance problem, I would most likely want to check the slowest pages report against the IS logs on the entire farm, find the pages that are running the slowest, and then narrowing down specifically what log data I have around those pages to see what information I might have in ULS. or in IS or in the app log to support when there's problems.
So what you're referring to there is that not only does it give you, for example, raw log files or raw IIS logs, as an example, but you guys have baked into the tool some specific custom reports that allow you to surface that data in a way that has some prepackaged queries, if you like, against the logs. That you guys have found that particularly useful, like analyzing particularly slow pages, particularly slow requests. Is that a good overview of it?
That's absolutely correct. And there's a number of other reports there. You might want to see a few other aspects. And also keep in mind that when you approach this the first time, you're seeing all the data. So the important thing to become accustomed to is actually filtering. So the reports can be filtered, the logs can be filtered, the counters can be filtered, and you want to use those filters to restrict the data that you're viewing. There is a bit of reverse logic in the filters, because what the filters are actually saying is hide these things, not show me these things. So you do have to keep that in mind when you set them, but they definitely you would be using filters in any use case of the tool. That is really where the power starts to come to life.
So an example would be, I'm looking at all the IIS logs, but I only want to see ASPX requests. I'm not really interested in performance problem on looking at my CSS files for now, for example.
Right. So what you would want to do there, I know the logic might be a little odd, but on the custom report, say you've sorted the top sites report, for instance. You want to see the things that are hit the most for some reason. Maybe you think you have some programmatic code that's running that's causing your perf problem. You have reasons to suspect that, perhaps. So in the filter for the reports, you would want to set a filter such that you're not containing ASPX, because you're hiding things that are not containing, which means you're showing. You also probably are interested in the successful pages. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're only interested in the errors. Typically, when I'm doing this kind of investigation, I'm interested in knowing what actually went through to understand kind of what the system was doing. So I might say, I want to only show things, or I basically want to say hide things that contain the response status code of 400 or greater. So I'll do the greater than 400. That way I only see things that are 200 or successful page loads, and I get a better picture of all of the actual web pages that did come through to users during that time period. And I might be able to see some spikes, or I might see some specific pages that were really active, that had really long load times during that time period, and I might decide to then go investigate those pages with more detail.
If we break into the Perf1 details a little bit more, are there any specific performance counters that you would recommend people look at if they are experiencing particular performance problems?
Sure. So the perf counters we make available will show all the servers that are in the farm, that you've collected at least. Or if you're doing this live, that's another thing to mention. You can run spdiag live on the farm as well. The scenario I outlined was the offline mode, but you can also just run it live in the farm, and you can even start perfmon capturing with a live capture. Regardless, if you had captured some perfmon counters already, we'll show all of the out-of-the-box counters that are available to you. If you had captured those, you can select them. The ones that are most interesting for these perf kind of specific issues in SharePoint is to use some perf counters that we created for you. These are perf counters based on IS log data, and you would select the farm category instead of a specific server, and you would most likely want to look at the number of requests with a time taken from 1 to 5 seconds, maybe 5 to 10, or greater than 10 seconds. Requests that take less than a second probably aren't related to your performance problem, but the larger requests that are taking long periods of time would be a more interesting pivot. So that's definitely a place to start.
So that's a lot of the functionality in the trends view once we're working in the UI. But there's the snapshot view as well. You mentioned a little bit about how that works underneath. But what kind of data would I expect to see in that view? That's obviously, I'm guessing from the name, being a point-in-time view of something.
Right, and that's exactly what it is. It's a snapshot or a point-in-time capture of the hardware that supports the farm, including the SQL Server and its databases and specific information about the databases. And also it gives you a logical view of, from the SharePoint object perspective, how the farm is constructed. What web apps and app pools do I have? What are my alternate access mappings? What are, where are my content databases? How are they attached? A myriad of settings that we think would be useful for you to understand. And one of the big data pivots here that from a performance perspective is we'll identify large lists. The version 2 tool changed how we did this. In the version 2 tool, we actually specifically are looking for any folder that has more than 2,000 items will show up in that report. So even if you've folderized your list into a good structure, if you have a folder within that structure that has crossed that boundary, we'll report that list for you to check on.
Okay, Dan, thanks for taking us through that great intro of the SP-Diag tool. I think let's maybe switch over now and Luca, give you a chance, and let's find out a little bit more about the permission reporting tool, which I know is where you've been spending some of your time and your focus. Do you want to maybe give us an overview of what this tool is? This is one that's new to the version 4 of the admin toolkit. So can you maybe give us some information of what this new capability allows us to do?
Sure. So the permission report tools aims to help users to identify problems in their security settings within a specific site collection or different sites of the system. The idea of permission report tools is to provide tools to the end user and the site collection administrator to understand the different security scopes that you have in a single site collection and to have a clear report of that kind of configuration so you can monitor your property and you can be able to fix some things if necessary. And it also provides a way to check the effective permission of a specific user to a specific item that can be a web, a library, or a single item.
So one of the powers of SharePoint, if you like, and I say power loosely because, with power comes responsibility, is that you can define down to a very granular level the level of security that a user has. And that's looking at a specific user, where they can go and what they can do. And then at an item level or a folder level or a library level or a site level or anything like that, you can go ahead and define whether you want to inherit from the parent or break the permissions. So this tool effectively gives you the ability to manage both of those scenarios.
Yeah, that's correct. So, and that's exactly what you said, the beauty and the being dangerous kind of thing about SharePoint, because it's so powerful, but you have to control what you're doing. One of the problem potentials of SharePoint is that you can create security scopes on single items, but as long as you start to love these and you can have millions of thousands of documents or link or list or items inside a folder, and you want to provide a single security information or single security scopes for each of these items, you may have manageability problems, governance problems, and performance problems. And this is what Permission Report helps here. So Permission Reports is able to provide to you a report about the single security scopes that a specific site collection, site, or list has, and is also able to highlight item level security whenever it happens. And this is one of the features that we have. The other feature aims to help end users in answer a very basic question, which is what is the effective permission that this user has on my property? SharePoint is so complex and it's also so powerful, and it has this concept of administration delegation where you have the site admin, the site collection admin, the farm admin, and you can set security through different levels. You can be site collection administrator, so you have automatically access to everything inside the site collection. Moreover, the farm admin is able to configure security policies at web application level, what can be allow security policies or deny security policies. And from there, you're also able to have a sort of a control about who can access what within a specific web application. And that can also have different configuration depending on the zone that we're talking about. The check effective permission is a unique tool that allows you, end user, not site collection administrator, but the end user who has security management capabilities, to check permissions of a specific user to a specific item, and the tool will report the permission information even if the user that you are checking is a site collection administrator or is part of a policy that has been configured at web application level by the farm admin. So it's a unique tool because it provides to you a way to have in a single place, in a single UI, effective permission information, no matter if that permission has been configured directly to the item or are coming through a permission chain, that means site collection and or web application.
Okay, so I know that there are some third-party tools that have some of these kind of capabilities as part of their tool set as well. So we're now getting some of these tools directly out of the box from Microsoft, so that becomes very powerful, trying to track down specific problems that we're having around security for an item, if permission's broken, or trying to understand why a user, for example, can see or can access something that we didn't think that they could have.
Yeah, and I want to be super clear on this. Is actually a very good point. The first thing that we did in the product, and that was part of the April cumulative update we released this year, 2009, was to provide additional APIs for our vendors in order to improve their tools. And we are not going to replace them, because those tools still provide incredible functionalities that we don't provide in our tools. So, for instance, capability to copy permission between different users or to clone users. Those are kind of things that we don't provide in our tool. But we provide APIs, additional APIs for that. So even third-party tools will be able to provide better functionalities and less resource-intensive kind of activities by using these new APIs. So we can now dig a little bit about the permission report tool and have a better understanding of what this tool does. So basically, this tool provides several options for the site collection administrator in order to understand the permissions that are inside a specific item. So first of all, the tool is available for site collection administrator within SharePoint, and this is probably one of the newest approach that we had for this toolkit. For the very first time, we released something that is not available for administrators only or for farm administrators, but we released something also for the site collection administrators and the end user. So the end user and site collection administrator will be able to access this tool directly without asking the help of the web application, of the farm administrator.
So I'll give a link to the actual SharePoint team blog post where there's a great post about the actual SharePoint admin toolkit, and I'm looking at that right now at the moment. So I'll put a shrinkster together while we're talking. But in terms of what you're referring to, the other tools that we've been dealing with, the SP-Diag and the STS ADM extensions and things, are all operations that an administrator needs to run. Like the SP-Diag is an exe that the administrator's got to run, on a particular machine, and STS ADM command obviously only an administrator would have access to. But these permission reporting capabilities are new items that appear in the actual SharePoint site. And I think that's what you're getting at, so that users in the site can access it directly without having to, for example, log on to the server.
That's correct. Both the check effective permission and the permission report tool, both of them are available within the site at site settings or through the contextual menu on specific items to the end user and the site collection administrator. So you don't need to log on to the server in order to benefit about these new tools.
Okay, I've got a Shrinkster here. For people that want to check the team blog post, it's shrinkster.com/1ALU. So that'll take you straight to the team post, and there's some nice screenshots showing this permission reporting tool. And then the compare permission sets is part of that as well. I think that's the third link that we haven't really spoken too much about.
That's correct. So the compare permission is an additional functionality that we have in the permission reporting tool. And what the compare permission tool does, it basically provides you a capability to understand the different permissions that you have between a specific object and their parents. One of the problems that we saw in our environments, and we heard from clients, is that the break role inheritance or the break permission functionality in SharePoint, very powerful, very useful. But sometimes you may have governance problems because you are unable to understand the different permissions that someone has configured in a specific item versus their parent. So you normally break the permissions, and then you start creating your permission set on a specific object, and in a very short time you're going to have problems about different permissions in different items, even if they are in the same hierarchy. So you can imagine a scenario where an administrator, site collection administrator, requires to provide a security governance cleanup on their property. And one of the things that they want to do is to re-enable their permissions chain. While this is a very intuitive and quick operation that you can do through SharePoint, one of the things that you may lose here are additional permissions that the end user created when they broke a role inheritance. So this tool is able to provide to you a comparison between permissions on a specific item and permission of the parent, and in that way you are able to understand why a specific permission was removed or added, why a specific permission was modified, and then with that information in mind, the site collection administrator is able to safely rebuild the permission chain in order to be sure that nothing is going to be missed by re-inheriting permissions.
In terms of the actual naming of the features, though, the compare permission sets sounds similar to the broken inheritance reports. How do the two differ? What's the kind of the goal of each one?
So those tools work together. So you are absolutely right. And also the kind of functionality they provide is to being able that the site collection administrator has a way to understand the security model of their site collection and maybe fix it. The permission report tool is a combination of UI and reports that you use in order to understand at first glance where break role inheritance happened in your site collection. And that is something that the UI shows you immediately. Moreover, you can create reports in order to understand permission settings on lists and libraries, because the UI only provides to you granularity level until a specific a library or list. And the reason for that was because in SharePoint, in theory, you can have up to 5 million items on a single library, and doing such kind of things in the UI would be a little bit problematic. So one of the things that we did in the permission reporting was to have a UI for sites and lists, and then having a report for sites, lists, and list items. So this is the permission reporting tool, and this is the way that you have in order to understand the security settings in your site collection. The compare permission set is one of the features that you have also in the report, and helps you to understand once a break role inheritance happens, so a new security scope is created, the differences in terms of security settings between that scope and its parent. So those guys definitely work together, and both functionalities are available on the UI as well as on the created reports.
So I think that's a key thing for people to understand looking at the admin toolkit as a whole, is that we've said this is a series of items in the UI, but I think that's one of the other differences as well, is that the SPDiag tool, for example, we call it a tool because there's an exe we run and there's stuff inside that dedicated application. But the permission reporting tool, it's not a single capability. It's these various items that we've spoken about, and it's the usage of these components together that is sort of what's encompassed in what we call the permission reporting tool. It's not a specific item on its own. It's the amalgamation of all of these functionalities.
That's absolutely correct. It's a set of functionalities that the site collection administrator and the end user have in order to manage permissions in their properties.
So many sides of the same coin, if you like, that all complement each other in terms of what goal you're trying to achieve.
Totally, and that's also the reason why, if you want to have a little bit of additional technical information, they are coming in a single feature. So from feature perspective, this is a single feature, a different level in SharePoint, but you are absolutely right. They provide different functionalities within that feature.
Okay, it's kind of reminding me that I've faced a similar problem recently, aside from permissions around the navigation, because you've got similar capabilities in terms of how you can inherit or break the inheritance on the navigation as well. So maybe that's a suggestion for the next tool in version 5 of the admin toolkit.
Sure, and that's a good point. And also another thing that I would like to mention here is, and this is connected to what Dan was talking about, the functionality of the entire admin toolkit effort. We realize that this is one of the big problems that our customers are asking for, and specifically for the check effective permission part of this tool. Check effective permission will be available out of the box in SharePoint 2010. So beta 2 of SharePoint 2010 is going to happen very soon, and when you will be able to play with that, you will see that the check effective permission tool is now bundled in the product.
So as a user of 2007, as an administrator who's got farms that are going to need to continue running for at least some time, are you able to give me some idea on the future on the administration toolkit in 6 or 8 or 10 months' time, or whenever it is when 2010 comes out? Do you guys have plans to carry on releasing 2007 versions of the toolkit? Or is there going to be some kind of cutover, then it will only support 2010?
This is the last version that we provide for 2007. The next version of the toolkit will be available for 2010. And our goal is to continue to support the same features within the toolkit, or just like we did for the check effective permission tool, to move some of the core functionalities and more demanding functionalities within the product directly.
Okay, so good to know at least that we've had 4 versions of this toolkit for 2007, and the toolkit itself as a concept will continue to carry forward with us as a testing ground into 2010 and beyond. So can I run all of these toolkits on any environment, or would you recommend that some of them only be run on a dev environment, for example? Is the permission toolkit something I would run on my live environment as well?
Yeah, totally. So we designed those tools and the API underlying those tools in order to be safe on production environments. And that's one of the reasons why we had the report approach for being sure that no real-time resource-consuming operation would happen during production hours. Another thing to mention to the reporting tool is that we have a capability to provide throttling about some of the features that we have. So, for instance, in example that I provided to you before, let's say that you have a document library with a couple of thousand of documents, or let's say 500,000 documents inside, and you have a lot of permission break role inheritance, that mean a lot of security scopes. What the tool will do by default is that will not create a report for such of a massive kind of items in a single document library in order to preserve functionality of a live environment. With that said, we released an STSADM command that the farm administrator that we believe is able to understand and to control the usage of the entire farm is able to run in order to unblock doing permission reporting on a specific huge list. So the farm administrator will be able to let the site collection administrator doing permission reporting on a specific library by using STSADM command. So the idea here is I have this huge library, I want to create a report, then I contact my farm administrator, I ask the farm administrator to unblock the capability of the report for that specific library for the weekend, and after that I will be able to schedule the job that will create the report during the weekend without affecting the productivity of my system during the business hours. And if I am an evil site collection administrator and I want to try to run this tool on this huge library during business hours, the tool will prevent that and will not allow me to do that.
It's great to hear that you guys have put some thought specifically into making sure that these things, can be adjusted to the environments that they're running on, and kind of give you some safety nets to fall back on as well. I'm sure not too many of us have evil site collection administrators, but I'm sure there are a few of them do pop up every now and then. Unfortunately, we had to cut the episode a little bit short because Dan and Luca are both very busy guys at the moment preparing for the SharePoint conference next week. But I think we've covered some really good intro to the SharePoint Administration Toolkit and seen some of the key new features that have come in the new version, as well as some of the items that have been there already that are definitely worth having a look at as well. So thanks guys again for your time and for sharing your information on the SharePoint Administration Toolkit, and we look forward to some new versions coming out in the future with even more goodness packed in. If you've got any questions about any of the ideas discussed in this episode, or you'd like to give other feedback, like show topics or requests, then mail us at feedback@TheMossShow.com. To access the archives of all of our shows, browse to www.themossShow.com or www.TheMossShow.com.